We do bands, we do DJs, we do national acts, we do speed painters, caricature artists. We do the craziest things. If you think it, we've got it. And if we don't have it, we'll find it. We will not disappoint. That is our promise and commitment to everyone. And have a Breezin day.
Hi, this is Michael Dervech, VP of Breezin Entertainment, and today I'm joined with Cindy Dervech and Jesse Saplinski on this episode of Breezin Chats. Today we will be chatting with our guest about what is driving or flying people to the Tampa Bay area, his journey on how he got to where he is today, and also look for what's in store for the future of the Tampa Bay area and the Tampa International Airport. Our guest today is a 9-year veteran of the U.S. Air Force and was also the Associate Director of the University of South Florida Alumni Association in Tampa and Assistant Vice President for Communication and Public Relations at Lanier Upshaw in Lakeland, Florida. Today our guest joins us as the Senior Manager of Marketing for Tampa International Airport. In this role, he manages the airport's marketing efforts across a spectrum of community and industry initiatives, including airline recruitment and retention, non-aeronautical revenue products such as concessions and parking, and the airport's focus on guest experience. In addition to being responsible for airport advertising, partnerships, and promotion, he directs all of the marketing efforts for the airport's general aviation system consisting of Peter Road Knight, Tampa Executive, and Plant City airports. Please give a warm welcome to Breezin Chats, Danny Cooper, the Senior Manager of Marketing at Tampa International Airport. Welcome, Danny.
Woo!
Thank you for being with us today.
I always have to make the joke when we do something like that. You never let a marketing guy write his own bio.
It's quite the bio. We had the opportunity of meeting Danny at a South Tampa Chamber of Commerce panel discussion with a couple of the other marketing directors around the city and the different venues, and I was so impressed. He's witty, he's fun, but he does tell me that Maria Cook is his boss. A little shout out to Maria.
We love
Maria.
There's something about the way a Bulgarian tells you what's what, and you just kind of go on.
But she has that sweet, such a sweet voice.
It's 100% true. She's, and you know, as much as we joke, she is a true professional and a credit to both the airport staff as well as her profession of event planning and event management. Give her another shout out. She's Event Planner of the Year last year for the MPI group
yes,
here
she was.
locally.
Well deserved too.
Is 100% well deserved and such an asset to the community as well as, of course, the airport. So yeah, wonderful teammate of ours.
Of ours too. I feel like she's part of our team after all these years.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
working with her.
So many.
So I usually like to kind of get started. I like to know kind of more of like your journey. Where are you from? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to college? Kind of start me from the kind of like the grassroots beginning of your life.
Sounds good. Well, I like to call myself a Florida native because only the first 3 months of my life were spent outside of Florida for the most part. I was born in Memphis, Tennessee. But 3 months later, my family and I, my sister and my two parents moved here to Lakeland, actually. So I grew up in Lakeland. I'm a Polk County guy. Proud to be Polk County. And so lived there up until I was 18 years old. I went to Kathleen High School, played football, baseball, played golf, ran track, ran cross country.
Kathleen has always done really well in football.
Yeah, so although I shouldn't oversell it. I played football for my 9th grade year at junior high, my 10th grade year in high school, and as my attire and bow tie might indicate, I'm not exactly a violent person. So quickly learned that football's maybe not your game. It's like, you got to kill that guy. I'm like, he seems like a lovely person. Why do I have to kill him?
Don't worry, Danny. I was third string offensive line. First team drop kicker.
Perfect.
Right.
So, but really active there. Also, kind of extracurriculars as well. Like, sang in the choir, did a bunch of other different types of things. So, but ultimately, my interest, my passion at the time was kind of military service, aviation, and those types of things. So, ended up fortunate enough to have the Air Force decide they would pay for me to go to college. Which is really nice, right? Yeah. So the Air Force did pay for my full freight to go to the Citadel, so that took me to Charleston, South Carolina.
Not a bad city to end up in.
Not a bad place to be at all.
Hard to study there. I heard the girl-to-guy ratio, too.
So that's a college at Charleston. At the Citadel in 1993, it was 100% dudes to 0
the city
ladies.
of Charleston.
Yes,
the city of Charleston is very highly female population.
So the Citadel was not co-ed while I was there. It was all male school. But yes, that is true. Charleston's just such a lovely place and still holds a really special place in my heart. The really interesting thing about my path at the Citadel is I started out as a computer science major. It took about 2 engineering classes and 1 programming class to realize this is not going to work out for me. So fortunately, through some conversations with the Air Force and other things, they allowed me to change my major. And I actually was one of the only people with a full ride scholarship in the Air Force, this highly technical service and everything else like that, to be allowed to get an English literature degree. So what do you do with an English literature degree? Well,
become the marketing director.
Something like that, right? So anyway, super fortunate again to feel like I put myself in the right situations. It's the best advice you ever get, right? Put yourself in the right place, be good to people, do the right things, and good things will happen to you.
So true. I'm a big believer.
Had the opportunity to go to pilot training for the Air Force, which I did for the first 12 months I was in. And it's kind of one of these really weird, pivotal moments in your life when you're sitting there going, this is all I've ever wanted to do in my entire life, and I hate it.
I can relate to the same thing.
Absolutely hate it. So, of course, we could get back to this at some point now that I work in aviation again. Still super passionate about aviation. I would love to fly now as a hobby or as a passion, but doing it for a living was just something that did not match with me at all. So again, what do you do with that English literature degree? And the Air Force looks at you and goes, there's only like 3 things you can do with us with that degree. And you can work in personnel, you can be a cop, or you can do public affairs. And like, public affairs sounds pretty cool. What do you do when you do that? It's like, well, you work with the media, the community, you get to, yes, you don't even have to go any farther. Check it all off. We're good to go. All you have to do is be nice to people and communicate well, which turns out you can actually make a career out of that 22 years later. I'm still pretty much making my trading on the fact that I communicate well and I'm nice to people. Became a public affairs officer, just had a tremendous 9 years worth of experience in the Air Force there.
You said 9 years?
9 years. 8 years, 9 months, and 23 days, according to the form they give you when you walk out.
Is there like a commitment you have to make to the Air Force after you got out of college?
There is actually. So to the 4 years of college equals 4 years of service is essentially how that worked out. Now, interesting on the officer side. So I was commissioned as a lieutenant when I came in. On the officer side, I always like to say the difference between officer and enlisted in terms of how your commitments are served is on the enlisted side in the Air Force, you have to take action to stay in. So the day you signed up, you have a period of service, 4 years, whatever it happens to be. At the end of that, if you don't go back in and say, I want to stay, you're done. Like, you served your commitment. On the officer side, it's indefinite. So they will continue to assign you to places as long as you don't get in trouble, as long as you get promoted and you don't ask to leave. So, and I thought I would do 4 years, and instead I did 8 years, 9 months, and 23 days.
So then you were an officer.
I was, yeah. So I separated, my last duty station was here at MacDill, actually, which is how I ended up back in the Tampa Bay area after having grown up in Lakeland. So from 04 to 06, I was the director of public affairs at Tampa's awesome MacDill Air Force Base. It's just such a great experience to be there. Back in a community I love, back in my hometown, essentially was really fun. Ultimately decided that after almost 9 years, almost all of which were on a war footing, that I was just tired, and I kind of wanted to maybe try something else. And again, I love this community so much, and my passion for where we are is so great that I wanted to stay here. And so I have.
Bad place to live.
So I have, yeah.
And then the opportunity opened up.
Yeah, exactly. So when I finally got out, fortunate to know a lot of people when you're the public affairs officer at a base the size of MacDill, as well as in a community this large. You get introduced to a lot of people, and again, I like to say, I always did right by people. So when I asked people to do right by me, they were willing to do so. and got introduced to Scott Franklin and some of his business associates back over in Lakeland. I didn't know anything about insurance, but they had an agency they wanted to rebrand and grow into a larger firm than what it had, kind of previously envisioned. So you got an opportunity to go work with them, and stem to stern rebranded the entire agency. New logos, new collateral, new taglines, advertising, new websites, and all those different types of things. And it's just such a immersion in civilian public relations and marketing and branding as soon as I got out of the Air Force. Something I'm still eternally grateful for, and something Scott and I talk about a good bit. Timing probably couldn't have been worse either for their agency or for me, right? So 2006 into 2008, 18 months later, the financial crisis hits, and the financial services sector was pretty rough, and unfortunately, got laid off, just like so many other people here in the area. And it's like, well, this is not how I envisioned civilian life when I got out of the Air Force. My kid at the time was 6 weeks old.
Oh my goodness.
So she panic mode to some extent, but you get home, you kind of reevaluate where you are, and you kind of like, okay, well, we need to figure something out here. And a couple phone calls from there, I ended up at USF within 3.5 months. Right, go Bulls. So
I think I'm the only bull in this room right now.
Yeah, and again, I know we're probably cart before the horse, or getting to however you want to look at it. But the super funny part about it is I can vividly remember at one point in my life, kind of coming out of the Air Force, was like, if I could ever work at a university or an airport, that would be so cool.
Wow, you just put it out. It's like the secret. Like,
right.
Put it out in the
world. Put it into the universe, and the things happen.
You.
Absolutely. So 5 years working at USF, and I find it to be one of my favorite things about saying my time at USF that were so great. We're getting to leave the Tampa market. So I was in charge of all kind of the face-to-face alumni interactions. So I was in the bigger markets that we had large populations of alumni all the time. Road football games, road basketball games, whatever it happened to be, wherever we could get people that went to USF. The great thing about that opportunity was to be able to reconnect people to a university with which they were unfamiliar.
Yeah.
So if you think about University of South Florida back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, it was a handshake deal. Right, I paid you X amount of dollars. You conferred upon me a degree. Our business relationship is over. It was a commuter school. It was a means to an end, whatever it may be. And the USF of today, most of them haven't had an opportunity to come visit, is nothing but 180 degrees opposite of what that is. It's an amazing asset to our community. It's an amazing asset to Florida and the Central Florida economy. And it was just such a great time to work there and kind of open people's eyes to what their university had become. And you have to kind of reconnect them with the ownership they have of this alumni association, the university they have. I always like to say, of course, every year, USF has more students on campus than my alma mater, the Citadel, has living alumni. So there's 51,000 students on campus roughly at any given time at USF, where the Citadel graduates somewhere between 350 and 380 a year. Do the math, we sit at somewhere between 48,000 and 50,000 living alums. So a little bit different in terms of size, scale, scope, and all those different types of things. But the one thing I can tell you is there's every university I've ever been around, there's at least a pocket of people that are super passionate about what they do, and you're clearly friends with some of them.
Yes, I have pretty passionate USF alumni friends.
Yeah,
we love it.
Yeah, so and then by way of kind of wrapping up this long journey that I've been on now, it's hard to imagine 22 years in professional life, and I just had my 44th birthday. But
baby.
Right. I don't feel that way all the time. My physical therapy appointment for my back yesterday didn't feel that way either. But,
they're frequenting.
We got a chiropractor. I was just there today, I can't talk.
So as an aside, I raced motocross growing up. I spent my life on motorcycles.
That's self-inflicted.
Yeah, exactly. And then,
of course, a Lakeland thing, though. I know a lot of Lakeland guys that did the
motocross. And then, of course, when I played baseball, no, I wasn't out playing outfield. I was behind the plate. So my doctor, even when I was a kid, was like, all of these things you're doing to yourself will at some point come back to haunt you. Apparently, that's somewhere around 43, 44 years old. But in 2013, I had the opportunity to step away from USF, and really at that time I was like, what do I want to do? I don't want to just chase a job anymore. I don't want to just chase kind of, what is it I want to do? Where does it want to be? And I couldn't come up with a good answer for it. Again, just having the great fortune of having some benefits that came to me through my military service. The post 9/11 GI Bill provided the opportunity for me to go back to graduate school. So I said, after kind of having a kid and going through a marriage and a divorce and then working, all these other types of things, I was like, for the first time in my life, I'm going to take time for me, and I'm going to invest in me, and I'm going to do something for me.
Wow.
And that thing at the time was, I'm going to go back to school for at least a year full time, and I'm going to get a master's degree. And I kind of made the decision too that I wasn't going to get a master's degree in public relations. I wasn't going to get a master's degree in marketing. I'd been doing that for, at the time, 18 years. I don't need a master's degree in that at this point in my experience. Yeah. But what can you do to round out that skill set? So I'll start with an MBA. I'll get a master's of business administration. So I started in that program in 13. Took my first finance class that fall, and turns out I had some degree of acumen for finance. And my professor was like, "You've never done any of this before?" I was like, "No, I have an English literature degree. I'm a public affairs, public relations, communications, marketing person." He's like, "Well, you clearly show some acumen for this." I was like, so I looked in the catalog, and it turns out for 6 more classes you could get 2 degrees while
You're
you're
becoming
there.
a lifetime student.
So I was like, well, 2 years worth of the GI Bill, I could get 2 degrees. It's all still paid for. So I went and I set up for the dual degree track, so a master's of business administration as well as a master's of finance, and was tracking along just fine, having a great life, wearing shorts and flip flops and carrying a backpack to school every day. By far the oldest day student at the University of Tampa.
Maybe then, but not like it was back in the day.
Yep. So then. 1 year in, the best laid plans, right? So was it Mike Tyson said everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face or whatever it was. So I'm sitting in a marketing class appropriately, and Carrie Getz calls me. Shout out to Carrie, because everybody in this town knows Carrie, right?
Everybody.
And so Carrie and I go back to, we're 13 years old in a YMCA program here in Florida, and she gives me a call, and I know she's just about to pop with a baby, and she says, I've got a favor, and you really can't say no. I was like, well, I don't know why you needed to say the last part of that, because first of all, you've been a friend of mine for 30 years. Second of all, you're Carrie Getz. Nobody ever says no to you. But she said, I want to go out on maternity leave. I want to stay gone for 4 months, but there's some staff gaps at the airport, and it turns out they want somebody just like you to come watch over the staff while I have a baby. So I'm doing the math again. I'm like, summertime, cool. Looking at my bank account, going, I've been spending money, not making any. That sounds pretty cool. So 4 months. I was like, 4 months, sure. I'll just dial my course schedule back over the summer and go work at the airport. And I never left.
Oh my!
So that was in the summer of 2014.
History, right?
Yeah, that was in the summer of 2014, and still there, working at America's favorite airport with one of the most dynamic airport teams that you'll find anywhere in the country, and in a building, a community, and an industry that I'm just absolutely so passionate and in love with. And I'm probably the luckiest guy in the world. I probably have done a few things right in my life to put myself in positions to be the luckiest guy, but I make sure I wake up and go to bed every night just saying you're a pretty fortunate guy, Cooper.
Yeah,
it's kind of funny how you started your career in aerospace, and you're probably going to end your career in aerospace.
And for everybody out there listening, there are good jobs in aviation. And I don't think a lot of people understand the depth and breadth of opportunities in the aviation career field if you're passionate about it. I tell people all the time, I wish I had found airport. Like, I wish I had left the Air Force targeting working for airports when I got out. And I didn't do that. And so if anybody's listening, you should do that.
I hope somebody starts to listen.
Look at our...
We've got quite a few listeners out there.
Yeah. Look at our 700 staff people that work for the airport itself. We've got accountants, we've got lawyers, we've got engineers, we've got architects, we've got planners, we've got restaurant management people, we've got retail management people. We've got police officers, we've got firefighters. It is a city. So if you're passionate about aviation but you don't want to fly or fix an airplane, there's still plenty of things that you can do. there is a global pilot shortage. There is also a global shortage of people to maintain, and there's also a global shortage of air traffic controllers. Those are high skill, high wage jobs. So, so if you want to work in aviation, there's never been a better time.
Yeah, the changes at the airport are just it's something to be so proud of, that we live here and we get to experience that. And I know Jesse's dying to know, like, I love when Maria called and she said, yeah, we're going to start doing events at the airport. I go, what do you mean? She says, we're going to build an event space and we want to have happy hours. We want to bring people
Friday
in.
night
Friday, yeah.
Fans, and then I loved it, especially because there was so much growth. Was it last 2 years with all the pop up of all the new, like, Cigar City was opening, and the Rumfish,
Yep.
all these new restaurants, like Tampa Bay area restaurants, and
Flavors of Tampa.
Yeah, all the what's the other one? Ulele has a
Right.
spot. All these great restaurants that are well known in Tampa all
Shula's, I
have
think,
places
is
in the
there.
airport, and so when they would open a new place, they would call us and say, "Hey, we're doing a grand opening. Let's do some fun entertainment and
Right.
kind of get the crowd in here and know that we're here." But I felt like every time we turn around, there's a new restaurant popping open. In,
You know, if you back up a couple of years, a lot of it was a transition period when Mr. Lopano came on board about 7.5 years ago, and there was somewhat of a reluctance or hesitance on the part of the administration of the airport at the time to think beyond what had always been successful, and that's, I think, tough for anybody, right? If you're making lots of money and you're successful and your ratings are high and people are like, it's still America, it's the best airport in the world and all things, why change? Why do anything differently? But sometimes that's the toughest leap to make, because that's the next evolutionary leap. At that point, you're not looking at an incremental improvement, you're looking at a huge change. So it takes bravery, it takes and probably a little bit of lunacy at some points to do what we just
crazy for thinking this
to do what we just did over the last 3 years. 4 years ago now, if we've been open for a year or so. But the real answer to it is this market of Tampa and Tampa Bay deserves an airport that is as vibrant and is as ambitious as the community itself. And this is not a community anymore that is happy to donate employees and our young and our talent to cities like Atlanta and Dallas and Charlotte. And likewise, your airport shouldn't force you to fly through Dallas and Atlanta and Charlotte to get to the places you want to go. You shouldn't have to drive to Orlando to fly internationally. That is an unacceptable answer. And by the way, I'm prone to asides. I will also say, and you guys probably heard me say this when you heard me at the South Tampa Chamber, all of those of us who live here in this market are passionate about this town know two things unequivocally. There is never a good reason to go to Orlando, and there's certainly never a good reason to go to Orlando International Airport.
I've been to it too many times. Let me tell you, that drive home when you land and you gotta drive, and it's just it's confusing and it's a nightmare.
And we're all
not a
friends.
fan of
It's a friendly rivalry for sure. And what Orlando does, the number of passengers they serve each year, they are quite good at it. And I say the same thing about Atlanta, because when you tell somebody you work at Tampa International Airport, they see roll your eyes.
When I have that connection to Atlanta, I want to cry, because like it's just never a good thing.
When I tell people I work at Tampa International Airport, the first thing everybody says is I love our airport, right? So it's our, right? There's a sense of ownership. There's a sense of ownership and a sense of pride of our airport here in the community, and that's not something you find in other places. I can assure you that nobody that lives in New York and New Jersey says I love our airports. Right, they are a means to an end. Newark, JFK, and LaGuardia are utilities, right? They are a means to an end. Where here, it's this community treasure. It's this point of pride. And as Mayor Buckhorn used to say all the time, when Tampa had nothing, we still had the best airport in the world. Now Tampa has everything, and we have the best airport in the world.
And it just gets better every time I'm in there.
Right, and so the idea being is that the airport should never be the reason why commerce stops. The airport should never be the reason why somebody chooses not to come to a market. We are quite fortunate that we have a degree of flexibility in terms of our operating environment, because we are a special taxing district of the state. We don't report to the city council. We don't report to the county commission. We report to our board of directors, who are beholden to state law and federal law, and that's it. So if our board of directors says, yes, you can do it, if we can afford it, we go and we do it, right? So we are able to position ourselves as leaders in transit-related development. We're able to show, and Mr. LaPana would say the same thing if he was sitting right here. We have shown that with a little bit of guts and a little bit of courage and a little bit of foresight, you can build a fixed guideway system. Sure, ours is only 1.4 miles, and it connects the main terminal to our rental car center and economy garage. But if you think people don't like to use those types of modes of transportation, you should come by the airport sometime and watch how happy people are to ride that mode of transportation.
We just did it. We parked at the airport. We did the economy parking. We parked in purple.
Right.
Went to have you done it where you park at the airport? You always
I
do
haven't
work.
yet.
So you take this little tram, dumps you right into the center where you check in for the airport. Or if you did check in and you have a carry-on, you go straight into your gate.
Yeah.
You don't have to go through the
So it drops off right on the
Yeah,
third
it's
floor
awesome.
there.
Yeah.
Well,
does,
yeah,
yep.
the third floor, so you can go right to your gate, or you can go downstairs if you have to like check a bag or something like that. But we do it all the time, and it's quick and easy. It feels like a little ride, and it's
Yeah, it's
fun.
Start
and-
to your vacation.
And something else I have to mention that I love at the airport, I don't know how recently this was, but in the cell phone lot, I don't know if you guys know this, if you have somebody that's waiting to pick you up, they have a board now that'll tell you when the flight you're waiting on, when their bags hit the bag
baggage
what is it?
terminal.
Baggage claim.
Yeah.
So you know, okay, they're hitting baggage claim. It's probably I'm gonna go ahead and like head over
Right,
now.
yeah.
You know,
People tend to move on the landing time.
Right.
Yep.
But your
Now-
flight will show landed when the wheels hit the ground. So that
know
means you
that
still have to
takes a
taxi to
while,
the
yeah.
gate. You still have to secure the aircraft. You got to open the door. You got to deplane from front to back. Your rampers have to get to work on the baggage and all those different types of things. So, so yes, leaving the cell phone lot when bags are on the belt is appropriate.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
yeah, that's I don't know how new that is, but it's something that I've recently.
We're actually getting ready to revamp that sign because it's really, really valuable to that area. And I'll say that gifted with the brilliant design of the airport. So it was the first hub and spoke airport ever designed. And the idea going in was it would be the first airport designed for people, not for airplanes. Up to that point, every other airport had been designed airplane centric, not people centric. And we continue that legacy today, not only in the way that we build the environment, but the way we treat our guests. And we say guests because not every single person that comes to the airport is a passenger. Our numbers based on where we are, for every one passenger that comes to the airport, 0.7 people are at the airport to meet them or greet them. So on a day we serve 40,000 passengers, we actually have 70,000 people that come through. So it's 70,000 guests, 70,000 unique impressions somewhere on our campus each day. So it's massive in scale and scope, and it's massive in terms of the undertaking, the amount of people that are out there. I mentioned the 700 of us that work for the airport. There's actually almost 12,000 people that make a living at the airport. So if you think about it, you're not actually even my customer when you come to the airport, unless you park. We get 100% of the parking revenue. But if you don't park at the airport, you're not my customer. You're a customer of one of our concessionaires, buying a Chick-fil-A, buying a taco, going to Rumfish and getting a cocktail, going to Cigar City and trying a local beer.
And bought a bunch of retail items.
Just going to Eulalie and getting some char-grilled oysters or whatever it happens to
when you get to the
be.
airport too early, you go shopping.
So you
After a
are
cocktail.
so you're not our customer. So in reality, in some way, shape, or form, we are providing an environment for lots of other transactions to happen, for lots of other businesses to also be successful. So and long story short, we generate somewhere between $240 million a year in revenue that's ours. But all of these other businesses that are on the campus, those 12,000 people, the net effect of that is over 143,000 jobs supported in the Tampa Bay area and $14.4 billion in economic impact. Statewide and nationwide, aviation in general is somewhere between 9 and 11% of the GDP. So there's aviation-related businesses. Again, I go back to there's good jobs in aviation, kids.
Everyone is now like on the Tampa International website looking for careers.
Right, but if you think about it in a bigger scale than your own needs, than your own needs to get from point A to point B, think about how many other people each day are doing that and for what reason. Our entire economy, our entire business model is based on the ease of movement around the world. And considering the size of the oceans, the fastest way around the world, except for telecom, is on an airplane. And there's still a place for face-to-face interaction. And that's why air travel is growing so quickly now. We also know in prosperous times, people like to spend their money on things like traveling.
Yeah.
So in a market like ours, where we are leisure travel heavy, 65 to 70% of our travel out of the airport is leisure travel.
I was going to ask if you knew what the statistics were.
I
Business
do.
versus leisure.
So 65 to 70% 70% leisure.
That's where the math came in, finances.
I figured it's important for marketing.
So we're also a heavy inbound market. So on any given day, about 70% of the capacity that comes through Tampa International Airport is inbound. So of course those 70% leave again, meaning that 30% are going out from here and those 30% are coming back. So we're seeing bigger numbers on the outbound right now, and that's owed to somewhat of the growth here in the market. And if you really want to nerd out on it, our fastest growing and emerging segment is young traveling professionals, which is a segment we hadn't previously seen at the airport, which again kind of mirrors some of the growth in the Tampa Bay area. Where
It shows you that people still want to do that face-to-face, interaction in business.
And it shows the premium too that young people place on travel that maybe our parents didn't.
Yeah.
Right, where our parents would have potentially, gotten married young, started families young, build houses young, and work and all those types of things. I'll travel when I'm older. Where now people are delaying some of those decisions, like buying houses, getting married, having children, so they can travel. It's somewhat.
They watch their parents never do it.
It has somewhat flipped, exactly.
True.
And so we're starting to see that as an emerging segment for us. But you go back and you say, then if 70% of our travel is inbound or is from outside of the market, the first and last experience every single one of those people have is at the airport. And the last thing that experience should be is subpar. And it also shouldn't be Burger King and Papa John's and those types of things. We are more than happy that they were there for the times that they were there and they served the need. But the first and last impression of this entryway into your market should be a taste of Tampa Bay. And so that is the driving force behind the concessions redevelopment that we did over the last 3.5 to 4 years. So 70 brand new concepts. The only two concepts that are in the airport today that existed prior to the redevelopment are Cigar City and Columbia. Two proud Tampa brands. Cigar City completely remodeled. They shut down for almost a year, completely remodeled. Columbia is in the process of remodeling right now to kind of get up to our new standards. The other piece of our expansion that was really important and key for us was opening the main terminal back up. So the idea when the main terminal opened was that from any place on the third floor, which we call the transfer level, you would be able to see from end to end. We messed that up in the late 80s and early 90s when we erected those giant glass boxes that went floor to ceiling. You could no longer flow freely across the main terminal transfer level.
Yes, it was
So as we got ready to redevelop the area, we said on brand for Florida, on brand for the airport is lots of glass, lots of natural light. You should see sunlight. You should see palm trees. You can see water out of one side of our airport.
It's fabulous.
So how do you do that? And so when we decided to build, it was let's open it up. Let's get the light back in. Let's move our concessions down to nothing over 12 feet high so that sunlight and natural light can go from end to end. And for those of us that have been there for a while, the day that they opened up some of the walls and we were able to finally see from airside F to airside A for the first time in 20 years was kind of a big deal.
A big deal.
It's kind of a big deal.
It's really, truly is amazing when you go out there. It's bright, it's light. And I love that new space behind Hard Rock that you just opened up.
Yes.
The outdoor. I still haven't been over there.
We had that. They had the convention over there. It was a local group that we were able to assist.
AMAC?
AMAC, I think it was.
Who does the food and beverage?
The food and beverage person that manages all the SA. The one that manages your food, all the restaurants there.
Oh, so we actually have several different concessionaires, but Hard Rock is SSP.
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 Yep. And we hosted it outside, and we thought the weather was off, and the weather was fabulous.
Yeah.
And
so that's another really interesting thing about the redevelopment program we just did. For the time that the airport had opened until we redeveloped, every concession at the airport was under one concessionaire.
Okay.
Under one concessionaire, you're not necessarily motivated to make changes. You're not necessarily motivated to be creative. Competition brings out the best in people, provided the environment for competition is done properly. So in this round of redevelopment we did, we have 3 primary food and beverage providers.
So I didn't
So we
realize that.
split it up and we said, we want you to bid on these 6 concepts instead of the entire package. And we want you to bring your best foot forward, because in 6, it's like, oh, there's so much we can do with 6. And you look at, oh my gosh, there's 35. You start to kind of get to the bottom of some of that list of what you have in your portfolio, and it may not be as ambitious as we would like it to be.
Yeah,
exactly.
and it spreads the wealth.
So bring us your 6 best.
Yeah.
Suddenly you end up with these great concepts we have, and that's why you see what you see in the airport now. Award-winning program since it opened. Our concessions team, led by just absolute true professionals on both the food and beverage and the retail side, and we hold them accountable just like we do everybody else. And I will say one of the really gratifying parts about working at the airport is watching people who don't work for us take on our persona. So our concessionaires, our rental car folks, the people who push wheelchairs, the people who help with baggage, our airline partners, all of them, even our TSA is friendlier than any other airport you're going to go to.
Hands down.
Right?
100%.
And so it's this idea of, if you set an environment where you expect people to treat people right, people ultimately want to do that.
Yeah.
So if your environment, if your built environment is correct and your social environment is correct and you set the culture properly, that's what people naturally want to do.
They really do want to
It's
be nice.
it's not an airport where people are already uptight and tensions because they're confused or they're lost or they can't figure out how to get from one area to the other. Because people already some people are afraid to fly, some people already have
100%.
tensions high. And you're already immediately relaxed because you have that pleasant experience.
From curbside.
Yes.
From curbside to gate side till you enter the airplane. Everyone has been
100%. So air travel is naturally stressing.
Right.
So what can you do from a staffing standpoint, and what can you do from a built environment standpoint to reduce that stress? And we don't start any type of meeting that involves staffing changes or building changes or anything else like that without leading with that. How does it impact our guest? We lead with that, and then everything else follows behind that.
Being married to someone who's highly anxiety ridden when it comes to flying, every other airport really stresses him out. But he's okay when we leave.
He knows what bar he wants to go to
He knows
exactly
exactly what bar, he knows what gate, has what bar, which one we're going to.
And you know, we pat ourselves on the back a little bit, but during 3 years worth of just major construction with walls and cranes and roadway diversions and closures and lots of different things that happen, our customer satisfaction scores over the course of the 3 years dipped by 1/10%.
Wow.
That's nothing.
So we can't really
do you guys do
go
like
wrong.
these big stadiums have like these like secret people that come in and
Shoppers?
they go like secret shoppers almost like from go through the whole experience to see how their interaction is with everyone. Do you guys have any kind of program like that?
There's a little bit of that goes on behind the scenes. There's a lot of surveying that happens with industry companies that don't tell us when they are there. And so we actually pay to be members of folks that will gather information. And they'll be at certain places in the airport at different times, passing out cards that say, please take a survey based on your experience today. We, of course, do our own surveying. Once we give away free Wi-Fi, people are generally happy to answer 4 or 5 questions for us. And those questions are invaluable. We get anywhere between 12 and 20,000 unique responses a day just on our Wi-Fi surveys.
Wow,
We're able to run anywhere between 3 and 5 a day, and we can localize them in the airport. And just one of the kind of really fun nerd things about that is we can actually be looking at the results of that real time, and you could say cleanliness scores in airside C just dipped from where they normally are, and it's a dip beyond
Someone go to the bathrooms now.
beyond what it would be statistically. And I was just going to say 95% of the time it's because one of the bathrooms isn't quite up to standard, and that's a simple phone call to our awesome team. Flagship is our custodial partner at the airport. It's a simple phone call, and they get on it right away.
No, I've seen some airports now are putting the cleanliness like touch screens in the airports. Are you guys going to install something like that?
We haven't yet, and I'll say that we do have, if the airport hasn't met your standards, there's a sign right as you leave and those types of things. We have a little bit of an older demographic at the airport. The vast majority of our travelers are still 55 plus. So we tend not to rely on technology solutions where technology solutions may not make sense to the majority of our customers. So that piece of technology might be more confounding than just finding somebody that looks like they work at the airport and asking a question.
Right.
So we tend to try to still rely on those human interactions because that human interaction can actually see and feel and understand understand what somebody is saying and how urgent it was for them. So you're at the airport, generally speaking, probably never more than 300 steps from somebody that can help you.
That's somebody that cares.
And that person is trained, and our culture is that person will help you when you ask them.
Do you have a big training program as you hire new people?
We do. So to get your badge, which I'm looking down because it's usually on my belt, but I left it in my car. To get your badge, you have to go through a 30-minute overview of our brand culture, our service culture, and those types of things. So not only do you have to go through all of the security reasons why you have that badge and all the policies and procedures of how to use your badge and how not to use your badge. We make sure from an airport perspective as the issuer of that badge that we also make you walk away from that encounter understanding that you now represent us even though you don't work for the airport. You now represent us because people that are coming through the airport will not differentiate between who is getting paid by whom. They just know you work here. And because they know you work here, we have this culture of service. And again, most people want to do that. Most people want to be helpful. And by kind of setting that culture up front from the very beginning, we see very, very few instances
you've got
where it doesn't work.
happy employees, happy
That's
travelers,
the idea.
happy.
Yep.
So I have a really silly question. You know, when you go to connect the gate, go on the tram to get to your connecting gate, and you hear, "This is Bear Bob Buckhorn. Welcome to Tampa International." Who's going to do it now?
Good question.
I always love hearing his voice.
I remember Jack Harris.
He
It's
used to be
funny
Jack
that you
Harris,
say, yeah.
and then I've been traveling so much lately, so I just hear that voice. And
So we had Jack for a long time.
Long time.
Iconic,
A decade, I think.
iconic voice
Yep.
here.
This was Jack Harris.
In the tram system, we've at times partnered with our sports teams and those types of things. It's been the mayor for a while, and I can firmly report that we just recorded our new mayor's voice. So Mayor Castor will be there eventually.
That's exciting.
Her recording is in post-production and will be uploaded before too long. But I can tell you a really funny story about Jack Harris and his
There are
voice
lots
there.
of them, you know.
And then not those kind of stories. But so his voice being so iconic. But and we're in our cycle right now, summertime of afternoon thunderstorms. And there's a couple of things that are bad when thunderstorms come along. Vast open spaces and lightning with big metal tubes sitting on the ground are one of those things that are bad. So when lightning is within 5 miles of the airport, our ground crews can't work. And with the ground crews not being able to work, that means the airplane can't park. It can get close, but it can't dock because it has to be marshaled in by a person. And the ramp workers and the baggage handlers aren't able to get out from underneath the plane to unload your bags. In the worst of the scenarios, some people might consider it the best. I guess it just depends on what your perspective is. What can also happen from time to time is your plane parks and then the storm comes in. So now you're off the airplane, you're at baggage claim, but your bags aren't
coming. That's happened to me before. And you have to understand, it's just a nature of the safety of the workers.
Yeah. So my very, very dear friend, Brian Richardson, who works for the Tampa Bay Rays, was flying in on leisure with his son, Brett. I think Brett was probably 2 or 3 at the time. And they were down there in that situation waiting for their bags. And of course, there's a overhead announcement about every 2 to 5 minutes that says, due to lightning in the area, some delays may happen. Well, I guess after about, the 30th time that Brett heard Jack Harris come on talking about his bags not coming yet, there was a lot of, no more Jack Harris! No more Jack Harris! So I can say that is not the reason why. That is not the reason why Jack is no longer the voice of the airport, but it's a funny story about Jack's time as the voice of the airport.
I was just thinking about that when I was at the airport.
Yeah, that's a good one.
He's gone.
You know, I did not realize until you spoke a couple weeks ago that you are in charge of the other, like the airports as well. I did not.
The Plant City.
Yeah,
Yep.
I didn't realize that all.
It's an entire segment of our business that a lot of folks don't realize. So I can also back up and say again, I mentioned earlier that we're governed by a 5-person board. We typically don't refer to ourselves outwardly, particularly not locally, as the Hillsborough County Aviation Authority, although that is our legal entity, that is our statutorily dictated name. And the reason we don't do that is because for a long time, the airport did utilize some of the county functions for HR and civil service. And because of that, a lot of people thought the airport was part of Hillsborough County government, and it is not. So the airport is a separate entity, but the enabling legislation for the airport, written all the way back when, says we're charged with two things: developing commerce and tourism in our market, and we're charged with owning and managing all public aviation within Hillsborough County. So that means we have the other three public use airports in the county. Peter Knight, conveniently located on the tip of Davis Islands, one of the most picturesque airports you're ever going to find in the country. Tampa Executive Airport, over by the fairgrounds and the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, and Plant City Airport. Also, funny story, lots of times we'll be in Plant City and we'll tell people that we own and operate the airport there, to which they say, I didn't even know we had an airport. And we typically just turn around and point and say, you do, and it's right over there off of Airport Road.
That tiny little place.
But an amazing facility out in Plant City that was originally developed for shipping strawberries. Did you guys know the Plant City is also not named after strawberry plants? I always thought that it was named after Henry Plant, just like Plant Hall and everything else. So anyway, a little bit of history there.
I actually learned that at the Strawberry Festival. Like if you go in, they have like a little history of.
And so Peter Knight Airport over on Davis Islands was the original Tampa International Airport. It was the first commercial use airport in the community. The original terminal building there. So if you've been to Airside E, which is our Delta and Frontier Airside right now, the Works Public Administration murals that hang in Airside E actually originally were displayed in the original terminal building at Peter Knight Airport.
How many years ago was that?
So that terminal went away in 1950 when they started operating at the Tampa International Airport that was on the other side of where we're located now, so the Drew Park area. So the original terminal building at Tampa International Airport, where it's currently located, was on the east side of the field. Which would have been, Drew Park now. Of course, Tampa International Airport was Drew Field during the war and after World War II, that war. So Peter Knight Airport is great history, but what a lot of people don't kind of understand about the general aviation side of the business, which is privately owned and operated airplanes for the most part, is just how much of the aviation business that is. Almost 90% of operations in the country are general aviation operations. It represents a huge piece of the economic activity that aviation generates. Most people look at a Peter Knight Airport or a Tampa Exec or a Plant City and they say it's just rich people with their airplanes out there having a hobby.
Yeah.
That is a subset of what happens at each one of those airports, but those airports also attract aviation-related industries and aviation-related jobs. Right now, our three general aviation airports are generating somewhere in the area of $90 to $100 million a year of economic impact in our community. Wow. So if you're out there working on a Cirrus, or you're working on somebody's Pilatus or a Gulfstream or whatever it happens to be, those are high-wage, high-skilled jobs that are on our fields. Those folks then take those dollars, live and work in our community. Their kids go to school here and those types of things. So those airports are generating economic activity far beyond.
Plug there.
Far beyond those. They're generating economic activity far beyond rich people and their hobbies.
Yeah, it's awesome. You really don't. It always amazes me, like, you just don't, when you dig into an industry, you have no idea. Like, wow, really no idea.
That's the piece of the business where I get really passionate, because it reconnects you to the reason why a lot of people fly. And of course, there's corporate aviation and business aviation and those types of things that is much more driven by need. Mm-hmm. But the fun part of it, the big airport is amazing. Commercial aviation is so much fun, and we work at such a wonderful place. But sometimes it's spreadsheets and revenue. I mean, it is a big business. Like I said, $240 million of annual revenue. That's a big business. Mm-hmm. When you get out to the GA fields, the numbers get smaller, but the passion gets greater. So the pilots and the folks that are working there are doing it for the love of aviation. And that's always something that's nice and grounding and reconnects you to the reason why you love what you do. So I never ever mind. There's never a bad day at Peter Knight. No. You're surrounded by three sides on water.
Water. Right? The dog park is right there, so you just watch the planes right down.
Really special. What is? I know that you got some new and exciting things on the horizon. You've got a new project happening, ready to.
We sure do.
So ground.
We are what we would consider phase 2, though phase 3 is actually moving up and likely going to happen concurrently with phase 2. But the next big things that'll be happening at the airport over the foreseeable future, let's call it a 5 to 7 year horizon, You can see dirt moving right now across from the rental car center. That is where we are constructing a sky bridge that will go across the road that's there into the rental car center, and we're also building a central atrium building. That central atrium building will then connect to the north to a new 9-story office building, and to the south to one of the region's first 5-star hotels is the idea. The 9-story office building will be 3 floors of our offices. We will relocate some of our offices down to that building. The other 6 will be some of the most valuable Class A market space the West Shore District has to offer. The West Shore Office District is the largest collection of Class A office space in the state. And we're going to add 6 floors of space that's not only at par with the amenities those buildings offer in West Shore, but even better, because you could go desk to gate in 20 minutes, never having to move your car. So if you need to go on a quick business trip, you're one walk across the Sky Bridge onto a Sky Connect train into America's favorite airport, and on your way through the fastest,
That's awesome.
statistically speaking, fastest security wait times in the country as well. So yeah, you could conceivably be desk to gate in 20 minutes.
And when is that scheduled?
Looking to break to open that end of 21 to early 22. The office building itself will be built by a developer. We're not going to take that piece on from an economies of scale type of a thing. It makes more sense sometimes to use a developer instead of building it yourself. So in government contracting, when you do one-offs, it gets costly sometimes because you're buying steel for one building, you're buying concrete for one building, you're getting labor for one building.
Yeah.
Where a developer has relationships on multiple projects across whatever their portfolio happens to be, so their economies of scale can be greater. So we actually will build this building in partnership with a developer at a cost that would be less than what it would cost us to build it on our own. And lest I'd sound like we're just building a palace for ourselves down south of our current complex, the real reason why we have to move is about 80% of our staff is in a building that has outlived its useful life. It was started construction in '78, opened in 1980. The cost of maintenance of that building is now greater than what the replacement cost and those types of things that happen to it. It's also in the way of us expanding our curbsides. So Tampa International Airport is what we call an O&D airport in the industry. That's origination and destination. So we don't do much transfer business at the airport. Only 8% of our business is transferring, meaning 92% of the people that come to the airport are seeing the pre-security environment, and 92% of the people that are coming to the airport are likely somewhere around our curbsides or utilizing our curbsides. So as we grow to 31 million passengers over the next decade to 15 years, we have to decongest those curbsides. Otherwise, we have backups, massive backups down our parkway and into the International Plaza area and those types of things. And as I like to say when I'm speaking to groups of people or here, if you've ever been in an airport that was built for 15 million people but is serving 25 or 30 or 35 million people, that's not an airport you want to be in. So our job as a staff, our job as an authority is to always be ahead of that curve, because this market, again, deserves an airport that is going to be keeping up with, if not ahead of the growth, so that we are never the reason the commerce of this area slows down.
Probably a huge reason why we win bids like Super Bowl and national championships and things like that. I'm sure they take in consideration the airport, a
lot of it in this
Feasibility.
new
I'm
hotel
sure
will
it's a
hurt
huge
things
piece of
for.
it,
They do. So the Rob Higgins, Jason Augie, Claire, and Tony, and the whole staff at the Tampa Bay Sports Commission are great partners of ours. Of course, visit Tampa Bay, visit St. Pete Clearwater. Everybody that's kind of in this business of tourism and economic development, so Tampa Hillsborough Economic Development Corporation, the chambers, everybody. We're all in this kind of economic development game together. And so absolutely, when Jason and Rob call and say, will you write a letter of support for our bid of the Super Bowl? You bet we will. Will you write a letter of support in our bid for college football national championship? Absolutely we will. The best case study I can give you for why this region is so good as it is the NHL All-Star game that we had about 18 months ago. If you don't know the backstory about how that happened, the NHL was not scheduled to have an All-Star game that year because it was an Olympic year. And typically the NHL players are off during what would be the All-Star break to play the Olympics. But due to a disagreement with World Hockey and the NHL, the players were not going to play in the Olympics. So they said, we will have an All-Star game and it's going to be in 9 months. So the NHL surveyed the landscape and said, who can do this in 9 months? And they looked and said, Tampa just did this a month and a half ago for the college football playoff national championship game.
And they said, can you dust off those plans, make some refinements for what we have to do for the NHL All-Star game, and can we make this happen? And every single person in this community said, not only can we do it, we will exceed your expectations, and we would love to do it. So it was a bit of a race to the finish line when we got there, but anybody that came in for the NHL All-Star game wouldn't have known that what usually takes 2 to 3 years worth of planning and a bid cycle and those different types of things we took on and executed in 9 months.
That was a bonus for the city.
100%. Yeah.
Oh my God, it was a bonus. It was
It's
really
so exciting, especially for us in the hospitality and the entertainment industry. When things like that come to town, it's so much growth for us, and it's so exciting for us. So we love it.
Well, and I love people say, what is the airport? What industry is it in? And my answer to that is usually yes. Right, so
all of it.
tourism,
All of it.
yes. Economic development, yes. Transportation, yes. Our airport, entertainment and hospitality, 100%. We do that too. We do that too. What industry are you in? The answer is kind of yes. And I think, again, that's kind of a microcosm of what airports do for their communities. What airports do is facilitate the economic development and growth of a region. Our region has been heavily influenced and heavily reliant on tourism for years, but we're starting to see as Tampa emerges as a business destination as well. We see that on the aviation side. We're seeing our international partners like Lufthansa and Delta adding more business class seats to their flights. First class seats on domestic routes that are transcontinental, let's say from here to San Francisco. Those first class seats are in high demand.
I have a question about the international traveler, just
sure.
the different. So I know we do events for the airport when there's like a new, like a one way to London or
sure.
whatever. Who decides the nonstop? Is
Direct
that
flights.
the airport? Is it your different airlines? Who does that?
So the answer is all of the above when it comes to that. Everybody. So from an airline's perspective, they are looking all the time. Is there somewhere else we can devote this resource? And that resource being a crew complement of whatever that plane requires, the gas it takes to fill up that airplane, and whatever their payment on the airplane is. Is there another place that we could devote that asset or those assets that will make more money than where it currently is? It's a fixed number, right? Every airline has a fixed number of those things that they can do. Right. So our job is to hopefully be ahead of them from time to time. So that's our air service development, research, and data side. Our job is to be ahead of them, is to be looking and saying, actually, we believe that you are missing an opportunity to make money here. Mm-hmm. The great case study we have for that is Tampa to San Francisco. It is a long flight. It takes a lot of gas to get from here to San Francisco. Gas is somewhere between 70 and 75% of the cost of operating any flight. So the longer the flight gets, the more the gas costs, the more they have to make, right? As we kind of got into that, what we are able to see at the end of every day is how many people left Tampa with San Francisco as their final destination, yet couldn't get there nonstop. And so then we start to build our business case. There are 120 people on average per day that are flying from Tampa to San Francisco and can't get there nonstop. Oh, this month it's up to 130. 6 months from now it's up to 135. By the time you get to somewhere between filling 50 to 70% of an airplane, nonstop daily service will not only fill the rest of that airplane, but it will exceed the capacity that you have. So our numbers were telling us that not only could we fill 1737, we were actually a little bit over capacity for that. And now data and history will show that we were right. United was right to take on the flight because they took it on daily, nonstop. It was successful beyond its wildest imagination. The non-sexy part, so the part you're talking about when we get a new route, when we get a new airline and those types of things, we throw a big party, right? It's great, it's exciting, and those types of things. What happens behind the scenes a lot of times that's not a sexy bill to see is when an airline decides to do it twice or 3 times. So what we call an additional frequency. So in our business, United just added an additional frequency. So now they're flying it twice a day round trip. So it shows that the numbers are right. It shows that we're on track when we're doing our things. Interesting thing about that is we, as a tourism destination, as a group of people sitting here who have a great deal of pride in our community and our area would say, you should be flying here because our city's awesome. We have Busch Gardens, we have beaches, we have breweries, we have this emerging restaurant scene, we have a river walk, we have all these types of things. And the airlines will say, awesome. Am I going to make money?
Yeah, that's
Right.
all I
Right?
want.
So, however, when we build our business case, we never leave those things out. And the reason why is because it can be a tiebreaker.
Yeah.
So sometimes they might look at it and say the capacity is the same, the numbers are the same. We're going to make the same amount of money if we flew this route versus this route. But one, we know that the Tampa market is hot. We know it's a destination for a lot of people for a variety of different reasons. We know that this airport team is the best in the industry. We know that this airport is the best in the industry. And the biggest piece of it is they know that this community will support that flight more than any other community they can go to, because our economic development partners, our DMOs, destination marketing organizations, so Visit Tampa Bay, Visit St. Pete, Clearwater, and all of the partners in the chambers and the cities and that come to the table for these types of things, support flights here like no other market does. And because of that, that's the tiebreaker. That's the secret sauce.
That's it.
So the airlines look at it and say, can I make money? And when we say, yes, you can make money, and that's when they really start to listen.
I'm just waiting for that direct flight to Greece.
Right.
Is that on the horizon anytime soon?
We pick a lot of
good
our
questions.
flights, like, we go a lot of girls trips, stuff like that. A lot of stuff we look at is like, what can we get direct, and like, what's
Right.
the city we haven't been to that flies direct, and we'll just kind of like pick something that way, just because then if you got a connection, you're losing then a half a day because it's a couple.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I mean, having direct flights to different
Right.
cities is a huge part in how we
yeah.
choose our destinations.
Yeah, so important distinction. Direct means you could stop. You just don't have to get off your plane.
Yeah.
Non-stop meaning you don't
Non-stop,
get off, right?
Non-stop.
So
Non-stop.
direct means the flight number doesn't change. Non-stop means you don't land.
Non-stop is the key.
But absolutely, so direct is one step along the chain. Sometimes non-stop is the key. But absolutely, and truthfully, what we're seeing is, with the exception of some of the heritage airlines that are heavily invested in their hub systems, and it's a little bit difficult to unwind, the point-to-point flying is where a lot of the industry is going now, which is the reason why. So you can see at a place like our airport, where for the longest time you were going to New York, or you were going to Atlanta, you were going to Charlotte, you were going to Dallas. Those were kind of the areas you could go, where now you can say, no, I actually don't want to do that. I want to go direct to where I'm going nonstop. And that opportunity is there now. One, because that's the customer's preference. Two, because they make more money. And three, the business model's changing a little bit.
Crazy.
It's
I could
awesome.
talk about this all day.
All
So
day.
could I get paid. I get paid to do the same.
Yeah,
I
I love it.
I like always mind blowing.
So I often say that I would go out and talk about this for free, and I probably do sometimes when my friends or friends of friends are asking me questions at happy hour or something. But it's such a crucial piece of any market if it's considered as such, and here it is. So it's not just that point of pride. It's not just that thing that we all kind of say, we have the best airport, we're so proud of it. It's a big piece of a puzzle that is continuing to help this market become what it always should have been, from an economic development and commerce standpoint, and where it's going to go. So we're just happy to be a part of it.
Yeah.
I would say a small part, but we're actually a pretty big part of it.
You're a huge part of it.
But we're so just proud and privileged to be a part of the
Yeah.
greater team here that is essentially responsible for making sure that the rest of the world knows what we've always known, that this is where you want to be for fun or for business.
I think you guys are doing an amazing job on all sides. I feel like a native, even though I wasn't born here, but I've been here for a long time. I've watched it evolve, and kudos to you. And I think your administration is taking it all to the next level, and just thinking fast forward to what the world looks like in 10 years and not being sleepy. So I think we have a lot to be proud of here.
For sure.
Yeah. Do you have any last questions?
I mean, like I said, I could ask questions all day. I love
Pick the best
travel.
one.
I love fly. Well, I asked like my good one. Like Bob Bullcorn one was on my mind because I was just at the airport. But I just appreciate your time. Obviously, you're a very busy man. Obviously, there's a lot going on. And but taking the time out and really educating us and our listeners, it's beyond appreciative in our book.
Well, I make the joke that I'm paid to be here, but I would be here on my own as well, because I like my job so much, and I love this market. And I say all the time, I grew up in Tampa International Airport. First time I ever flew out of there was 1981, so just 10 years after it was built. And I often tell the story about my connection to the building and the area. When I was 15 years old, my dad was traveling a lot. And so after I got my driver's license, one of the things I would do is drive him to and from the airport, because that was the way I could spend time with him while he was, traveling. So I have this kind of weird connection to the airport, and you talk about, kind of putting it out there into the universe. My dad was flying in. It's probably 2012 or something, and I'm sitting in one of our meter greeter areas. People are walking by, and I'm looking again at the badge that's not on my belt right now. But I'm watching people walk by with these badges, and I'm just sitting there thinking, God, it'd be so cool to work for this airport. and so here I am, right? And I think I take that kind of degree of pride in history that I have with the building and this community, as well as this kind of like, wow, I get to work for Tampa International Airport. It's like playing for the Yankees, right? Yeah. So the idea that I get to wake up every day and go to work there, it doesn't always feel like work. Some days, I promise, it does. But when I get to come out and talk with great people about the great things that not only the airport's doing, but our partners that make it all possible are helping us accomplish. These are good days.
Yeah. Nice. So how old's your daughter?
So my son.
Excuse me.
That's okay. He's 11.
Okay.
He's a big baseball player. He's getting ready to start 6th grade, which would be middle school, except he goes to Christ the King, so he gets to stay there K through 8. And is also an aviation nerd, has a Smithsonian encyclopedia of aircraft that very rarely doesn't leave the house with him. So actually you probably have a more interesting conversation about actual airplanes and the history of those things with him than you would with me. Loves to play baseball. Very, very blessed to have just a tremendous kid.
In Tampa Little League?
Yeah, he plays for the
League?
Strike One Academy Silver Kings and Coach Jason Jones, playing travel ball.
So you're busy.
Always doing something. Yeah,
always.
Keeps us busy.
Enjoy it because they grow up.
Yes, absolutely, right?
They grow up.
You can't remember what it was like when he was an infant, but yeah.
Yep. Well, you said you had a date night, so we hope we're not keeping you too late for that.
I think she's proud of the things I'm doing, so she'll probably be okay.
Yeah, she'll be okay. She'll want to hear all about it. But thank you so much again for taking your late afternoon meeting with us, and please tell people how they can find you on social media for the airport and any other social channels you'd like to share.
Perfect. So easily www.tampaairport.com is the website. @FlyTPA are the handles on Instagram as well as Facebook and Twitter.
Perfect. Yeah. And as we always say, have a breezin' day.